Well, welcome to our first lightning talk of 2022-23. It's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Deani Van Pelt, who is going to present our first lightning talk, and we're really looking forward to what you've got to say about all the Charlotte Mason festivities that we're going to be having. I would just like to remind you, first of all, who I am. So I'm Professor Sally Elton-Chalcraft. I'm Professor of Social Justice at the University of Cumbria, and I'm the Director of the Learning, Education and Development Research Centre, and we host these lightning talks. And if you would like to look back at previous ones that we've had over the last couple of years, you can do so by looking at our LED University of Cumbria website. So once again, just to remind you that we record these sessions and then we upload them onto our website. I would like to once again welcome Professor Deani Van Pelt, who's going to be speaking to us this afternoon. And what we normally do is we normally invite our speakers to give their presentation, and then we open the conversation up for people to interact, share ideas and talk with Deani. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Deani, who has got some slides that she's going to put up. So obviously we will all be very small down the right hand side, and you'll only be able to see Deani's slides and a little bit of Deani. Have you got those slides up, Deani?
Oh, certainly. Thank you so much, Sally. I just wanted to say hello to everyone, and it's such a pleasure to be with you today. I'm actually coming to you from London, so just a few hours down the tracks. We have 2 grandchildren here in the city, and we're spending a week visiting them. So if you hear sounds, they are indeed real children in the background. So I'm delighted to be with you. Ordinarily, I'd be coming to you from outside of Toronto, Canada. We will pop up our slides then. And oh, I'm sorry.
While Deani's just getting those up, I should have actually said that Deani is one of our professors of practice and has been working with us over the last couple of years. So very, very warm welcome to Deani. Brilliant. That's great.
Very good. Yes. So today's lightning talk is about Charlotte Mason and some of the festivities that we have planned for this year, working with the University of Cumbria, the Charlotte Mason Institute, and the Armament Museum. I am a board member with the Charlotte Mason Institute and a visiting research fellow in Charlotte Mason Studies at the University of Cumbria. A brief disclaimer, I may have some titles incorrect for either names or talks. Everything is provisional, but here we are in October with a fantastic year planned for next year. So you may see, as things are rolled out throughout the year, there may be some adaptations, but for now, this is the first unveiling of our plans for 2023. And as has been highlighted, this is the centenary of the year Charlotte Mason died. So 100 years after Charlotte Mason left us, we're going to take a look at whether the increasing renown that Charlotte Mason and her ideas are experiencing are actually worth all of the attention that they're being given across the world. So first of all, I'm going to give the most unsatisfying introduction as to who Charlotte Mason is. She was born in 1842. As we know, she died at Scale Hall in 1923. I believe, and I'd love to have conversation with folks about this at some other point, that a turning point in her life occurred when she gave a series of lectures in 1885-86. Prior to that, Charlotte Mason attended about 20 years earlier the Home and Co, the Home and Colonial School for Teacher Training in London. She then taught in Worthing for about 14 years in an infant school. Then she went over, worked with Louisa Hubbard as at Bishop Otter College, where Louisa was setting up one of the very first teacher training institutes for women. And after 4 years there, Charlotte Mason then spent, so if you're doing the maths with me, we're now getting into the mid 1870s. She spent a number of years writing geography texts. which means Charlotte Mason got to know all of the shires and all of the land across the UK. But not only that, if you pay careful attention to those 6 geography texts that Mason wrote in those years, she was watching people, and she did a fantastic study of what human culture can bring to an area. That's all I'll say about that. But what happened in 1885 is she was invited, she was living in Bradford at the time, and she was invited to give a contribution to the refurbishing of St. Martin's Parish Church. She was not a woman of means at that point, although the sales of the geography text did help her to be self-sufficient. But what she said she could do, instead of giving a financial donation, she could give a series of talks. And those talks could be ticketed, and that would be her donation for the church. What is very significant is that that church no longer exists. That building is gone. We see an empty block. But what we do have is the set of 7 lectures to ladies that Mason gave in that year, 85-86. They went on, they attracted so much attention that it went on to be published in a book called Home Education, not entirely to be confused with homeschooling as we understand it today, but the education of a child that takes place in the home. Charlotte Mason had a deep respect for the role that parents could play, and she thought that it hadn't been explored as much as it could have been, and therefore gave these lectures. Of course, she went on to write many more books, which again are all cobbled together from mostly from the articles that she wrote in the journal that she established. And I am getting ahead of myself. But what happened with that set of lectures is that she attracted so much attention. She was soon invited to move to Ambleside to set up a teacher training college, initially for governesses, and the doors opened to the college in 1890. She called it the House of Education. Shortly after that, she started a journal which published monthly, and she was the editor of that journal until the year she died. The journal did publish for 99 years, every single month, right through both World Wars, although the volumes do get slim in those years. She set up a union of parents, the PNEU, Parents National Educational Union, with chapters literally across the world, opening and organized out of the City of London, the PNEU, mostly under the capable work of Henrietta Franklin until the 1960s. The other thing Charlotte Mason did, in addition to setting up a teacher training college, publishing 6 volumes on education, starting a parents' union, she also started a union of schools. And the schools were called the PUS schools, and they had their own curriculum. That curriculum was used in home and school classrooms across the empire throughout her life and for decades following. So that's my very insufficient introduction to Charlotte Mason. I haven't given you a single quote from her incredible writings, but I would encourage you, if you can see my screen, I'm holding up a book right now called The Story of Charlotte Mason, published in 1860. I would highly recommend purchasing even a used copy of that and reading it before next year to get a taste of who she is. The other biography was written about 60 years later by Margaret Coombs called The Hidden Life of Charlotte Mason. So those are the 2 biographies we have of Mason and her incredibly productive life. I see her not only as a leader educationally, but also as a leader of institutions, organizations, and an establisher of movements. She's a woman who's under-celebrated until our day, and it's just such a delight to be able to move into this incredible year next year where we can engage her ideas in multiple ways. So with that introduction, let's move, and I'm going to move much more quickly through the next slides. The Charlotte Mason Institute, as I suggested to you, that I am part of, tried to summarize what we think Mason's philosophy of education is, and this is where we've landed for the moment. I encourage each one of you to come up with your own succinct definition of what Mason believed about education. She espoused a relational education in a living environment filled with books, experiences, nature, and ideas, where the child is viewed as a person and the educator as one who cooperates with God. Let's unpack it just for a moment. Let's work backwards. She says educators are to be masterfully inactive. It is not all up to the teacher. Let's move up a line. The child is a person. This is radical. 1885, Charlotte Mason is declaring children as persons. I'm from Canada. Women were not declared persons in Canada in a legal way until 1929. This was radical, and her anthropology, it's actually the anchor. The anthropology of the child and of the person is the foundation upon which all of her philosophy resides. What does an education look like in a Charlotte Mason framework? It's filled with books, living books, experiences, nature, and ideas. She sees children as little philosophers, and she wants, therefore, because they are persons, that they would be in a living environment, not a fake, cobbled together, artificial environment, but in a real life where children are put in touch, mind to mind, with real ideas and real thinkers, and physically with real experiences. What is all of this? It's a relational education. She believes that it's a child's heritage to be put in relationship with three, following Matthew Arnold: relationship with God, relationship with the universe, nature, relationship with others. And that is humans who have come before, humans who are one's contemporaries, but also a thoughtful awareness of the humans that are to follow. Charlotte Mason Institute is about 20 years old, and it does exist to promote the principles and practices of her design for education, not to ossify them, not to say that as a static set of beliefs they are to be followed, but we see some nuggets of truth and good insight in Mason's ideas, and we deeply desire more probing, more exploration of whether those ideas resonate today. We love the term relational education, as I've said, and we have a vision for a relational education for every teacher and every student in every setting. It does not have to occur in one particular type of educational setting. We're so delighted to have 4 Charlotte Mason Institute scholars have appointments with the University of Cumbria, and we just see this as a foundation for so many more appointments and so many more relationships going forward. The Charlotte Mason Institute has 3 signature services. We have a curriculum called the Alviary. Do take a moment to look at it. We're working on school accreditation, and we have an annual conference. Last year's conference was all about literature, and the conference the year before was about science. So what's happening in 2023? First of all, we said we'd be here to talk about the conference. The Centenary Conference, very quickly, is going to be on July 19th to 21. That's a Wednesday afternoon until a Friday evening, located in Ambleside. We're calling it Charlotte Mason's Design for Education, and we're asking the question, an enduring legacy for today? And we invite you to participate as speaker, as contributor in any sort of way, or as participant in answering that question together in 2023. It is a joint venture. We're absolutely delighted to be working with the University of Cumbria. The university has 3 pillars: people, place, and partnership. And we see that this conference, this international collaboration in research, writing, and convening fits with the pillars of the university. It does contribute as well to Charlotte Mason Institute's vision for relational education for all students. We're just so pleased with the location, and we know, of course, it was Charlotte Mason's vision to set up her college first across the street at Springfield, but just a few years later moving over to Scale Howe. The fact that the Ambleside campus is the only university campus in the UK which is on a UNESCO World Heritage Site is incredibly meaningful and does speak to Mason's foresight. So, a little bit of detail about the conference. She's increasingly globally renowned. We owe it to her to probe her significance. How are we going to do this? We're going to do it through a number of panels. We'll have several panels on the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The afternoons will have practical sessions. We'll have immersions. And then to finish off the day, we'll have pub-style chats. You are invited. Every participant here is invited to respond to our call for proposals, to offer to contribute a paper to a panel, to offer to lead a practical session, or to offer to lead a pub style chat. And those chats are intended with an eye of looking to the future. What sort of research could be done? What sort of research needs to be done? Are there practical or theoretical collaborations in which we could involve ourselves? What other ideas are we missing? Let's get together later in the afternoons, have coordinated, convened chats so that together we can probe and move her ideas forward. Who is the conference for? It's for practitioners. It is for scholars. It's for researchers, authors, professors, other experts and educators. Folks whose mind has been captured in some way by Charlotte Mason's proposals for education and for leadership and for how to live life. What do we intend to focus on? Well, as you can see, there are so many things we could have probed, but we've narrowed it down. Wednesday afternoon and evening will be, who's Mason? Tell us a bit about her life. Let's probe it. We'll bring in her biographers. We'll bring in folks who understand some deeper parts of her identity, her legacy, her philosophy. And then Thursday, we'll focus on Mason's proposal that students should spend an enormous time out of doors as part of their education. And Friday will be the more literary side, her proposal about the use of living books, narrative, and narration in education. So again, when is it? The conference starts at 3 on Wednesday, July 19, and goes until Friday afternoon. But do note that there are 2 pre-conference days, both of which will involve visits to schools and afternoon immersion. So Monday will be in Grasmere. We have some Wordsworth experts who are exploring how Mason was inspired by Wordsworth, and we've already got pages of work done just on that, where Mason quotes Wordsworth in her work. And then Tuesday, we will be in the Langdale Valley Primary School. We will learn more about forest education, outdoor education in a very hands-on way. And then the afternoon will be a time for learning how to do nature journaling with one of the leading experts in North America, well-renowned John Muir Laws, who will be with us that afternoon and throughout our conference. So as you can see, we've broken up the conference in different ways. It is going to be very difficult to find a seat at this conference. Monday has 40 seats, Tuesday has 40 seats, and the conference itself has just over 140 seats. So if you intend at all to speak or participate in any way, we highly recommend that you register as soon as possible. The second thing we're doing in addition to running the conference is actually we've started a monograph series. Why on earth would we do this? Those of you that have done a search of the academic literature on Charlotte Mason will know that there is an extreme paucity of engagement with her ideas in journals and in scholarly texts. It's absolutely important that scholars in our time engage her ideas, critique them, interrogate them, probe them for where they hold promise, and to highlight some of the pitfalls. So we've stimulated a multi-authored monograph series. It's initiated by the Charlotte Mason Institute, the University of Cumbria, and the Armament Museum, and it's designed to highlight and explore the continuing educational and leadership relevance of Mason. We hope to connect Armament Museum collections, which includes Charlotte Mason collection, as well as the PNEU collection, and use, of course, capacities from the university. Again, the series, we have just accepted all of the monographs. They were all due on September 30th, and I cannot tell you what a feast it has been to be editor of this series and to be able to read 18 monographs. I had COVID 2 weeks ago, and all I did was read the manuscripts as they came in. There are 3 types: theoretical, philosophical, historical, and then the second set sort of focuses more on the ecological, the geographical, and the third more on the living books, narrative, narration, use of poetry, story in education. That's a rough overview, but just so that you can kind of categorize where all of the papers fit. So I've got 4 slides that show the title of the papers, again, very provisional at this point, but the first ones, as I said, give an overview. So the first 2, Elaine Cooper and Hilary Cooper, each give different overviews of her theoretically. We've got a leading philosopher, Dr. Esther Meek, and Lisa Cadora working on her educational insights philosophically, and then applying her theological anthropology to current education practice, focusing on spirituality in the classroom. Dr. Frances Ward does an overview about focusing on attention in education. PhD candidate Elizabeth Miller, looking at the abundance of God as it spills over for the view of the child and learning. And I'm doing something on the child as persons and with the great recognition which Charlotte Mason had as in 1893. Then more historically, we've got Dr. Carol Smith doing something about Charlotte Mason as an educational leader, and he only focuses on the correspondence that Charlotte Mason had with Henrietta Franklin. Fascinating paper. Then Professor Jack Beckman does a focus on the 4 principles after Mason died, each of the principles up until 1960 that led the Charlotte Mason College. A fascinating walk through history. Cannot wait for you to be able to read that one. And then, of course, we've got a paper by Sally and David on the British Empire, the great divisions of the world, and the decolonizing of the curriculum. Moving then to more the outdoor focus, we've got a fantastic paper, Never Be With Indoors When You Can Rightly Be Without. We've got one by Professor Lois Mansfield on nature notebooks. Unbelievable feast to read through when you see someone, as in all cases here, but to get a glimpse of Professor Mansfield's expertise and to see how she's applied it and actually see so much potential in the nature notebooking that students do, that they did do during Mason's time, the relevance that they have for our understanding today, but of the nature at that time, and then also how our students can contribute to what is known about plants and other insects and animals in our day. So very fun study about, as I look at the last 2, both focusing more on our digital age and our technocratic age. Beautiful works here by first two American authors, both liberal arts teachers and students, and then the last one by a teacher of literature. Then we move over and we look at the use of poetry. Sally and Rebecca and Helen and David working on the use of creative poetry to interact with New Testament texts in the classroom. Then focusing on narration and retelling, which of course, as you know, is central to Mason's philosophy by Dr. Shannon Whiteside. And we've got one on engaging with story to engender living ideas. So delighted that many of the authors of these papers are with us today, and I know I have not done any of them justice, but hopefully our appetites are whet. And then the last set of items that I wanted to share with you. So we've looked at the conference, we've looked at the monograph series. Well, what do we have planned for next year? Can we have like a larger picture? And this is where Lois Mansfield has just been invaluable, and then working with Sally and others to plan. Here it is at a glance. Notice how it follows through from January right through to the end of the year. So we'll start with something by Leah Bowden, which focuses a little more on the home educating parent. The Armit is going to be focusing its exhibit next year on Charlotte Mason, so that will be opened in February. Then we've got talks. Notice how we've got various talks, 1 per month. So one by the Charlotte Mason's biographer, Margaret Coombs. We've got Mason in the 21st century, Dr. Carol Smith, who is one of the visiting research fellows. John Thorley, again, he's an expert, a former principal of the Charlotte Mason College in the 1980s and 90s. Moving over to Hilary Cooper, emeritus professor focusing on outdoor ed. We've got Kathy Nutt-Brown, who is one of the authors who's written about Mason in scholarly texts. Absolutely delighted to have her here. Then over to a family workshop by Leah Bowden, and Leah Bowden's new book on Charlotte Mason is coming out called Modern Miss Mason next summer as well. Then moving through to Dr. Beckman, who will be the visiting Charlotte Mason scholar next year, and he will be doing a talk. Then, as I said, we've got our pre-conference immersion days. Then we will be releasing the monograph series for purchase, and then attending the centenary. Then Nature Journal workshop with John Mears, as we said, Jack Mears. And I didn't mention, we're going to have a centenary celebration on the Friday night to close off the conference. It'll be over at St. Mary's Parish Church, and it will include a feast of music, of poetry, of readings and recitations from Mason's writings, but also just from other works that Mason would recommend in the education of a child. We will have some professional musicians with us. It'll be wide open to the community, no admission fee. Come on in and enjoy a drink and a nibble following our celebration, our community celebration together. And then we've got a few more speakers to round out. My screen is covered here, but I do know that Stephanie Spencer is one of the other authors who's written journal articles on Charlotte Mason. So again, the privilege to bring together published scholars and up-and-coming scholars in other ways throughout the entire year. It'll be just a fantastic time to get to know Charlotte Mason and to consider whether her ideas have any potential for education today. So again, to review, the Centenary Conference, please to register. It's open now. The early bird price is 249 British pounds. It does include 7 meals, a banquet style meal on Wednesday night, breakfast together on both Thursday and Friday, a bagged lunch. I believe it's bagged or it's buffet style for lunch on Thursday and Friday, and then again a meal on Thursday evening and Friday evening. There'll be unlimited coffee and biscuits throughout the and other drinks throughout the entire conference in the Beehive, so that we can create an ambiance and an atmosphere of discussion and engagement. And yes, we will have the experts there, but once someone's at the conference, we are learners together. Whether you're studying to become a teacher, whether you're a brand new parent, or a seasoned published professor and expert on Charlotte Mason, we come together, we eat together, we talk, we experience together. Monograph series, at this point, we hope to make hard copies, some of which will be available through the Armament Museum, some through our online store at the Charlotte Mason Institute. We're also working with Amazon to do a print on demand, both digital versions, but also hard copies. So just working out some of the details of that. We've got beautiful designers working with us. So although these are academic papers, they're going to be packaged quite beautifully, and looking forward to being able to sell those at reasonable rates. And that is my 15 minutes.
Thank you, Deani. You have packed an enormous amount into those 15 minutes. Thank you very, very much indeed. I'm going to invite people to ask questions or make comments. Just while people are thinking about that, I'd just like to say we've also going to have in the series of talks a talk from Chris Barlow and Professor Heather Prince. Heather's our very prestigious Professor of Outdoor Learning, and Chris is a very seasoned geographer lecturer, and so their talks will be very, very interesting towards the end of the year. And the other name that I should mention as well is Karen Watson from the Institute of Education, has also been playing a very, very important role in all these planning activities. So any questions from anybody? And we've got loads of people who are writing the monographs here, which is lovely. Would anybody like to start with a question? Do use the hand function. Deani, do you want to stop sharing your screen, and then we can see you a little bit bigger, please, and everyone else? Okay, well, while people are thinking of questions, I would like to ask something about relational education, Deani, because one of the things that you've said is the importance of Charlotte Mason for today. And it's interesting that, you know, her name doesn't spring to mind necessarily as much as it should, probably. And it was interesting because I was having a chat with John Thorley about this. And one of the things he said is, because it's become so mainstream, a lot of what she said and did has become so mainstream that actually we don't actually know that these things come from her. But could you just talk us through relational education, because that's quite an important one, I think, and then other people do join in, otherwise I'll start picking on you.
Absolutely. I'd be interested to hear how others resonate with the term relational, but as we are interested in attracting contemporary educators to Charlotte Mason's ideas, when we say the name of a person, that induces yawns. An unknown name. You must get to know Charlotte Mason. But if we say there's this new idea, which is actually an older idea, and it's called relational education, can we talk about that? suddenly it somehow evokes images in people's minds. Oh, I know what relationships are. Well, let's talk about that. If the purpose of education is to put a child in relationship with, and as we said, the different categories, right? All of the spiritual, the God, and then the universe, and then humans, suddenly images and the teacher themselves, the person engaging the idea, can come up with other images. If we just say, well, let's get to know Charlotte Mason and her ideas, it doesn't create a platform for any ideas. So that's part of why we really caught on to relational education. I'm very interested to hear what you think about that. She, of course, didn't come up with it. She did borrow it from Matthew Arnold, who did say that that is what children have, that is their inheritance. It's their right to have relationships in those three directions. I'm interested to hear how others feel about that. I find that a number of schools that are opening that don't want to call themselves Charlotte Mason schools will call them a relational education, a charter school for relational education, you know, that kind of thing. So it is just another way of branding maybe the same ideas.
Okay, thanks. Anne and then Adrian.
Sorry, mine was going to take us in a different direction. So if Adrian's following on from that, let Adrian go first and then me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Adrian,
it's just a
Anne.
thank you. It's just a really kind of quick observation, really, because I think if you were to talk to a lot of teachers and head teachers currently, they would say that one of the keys of education and teaching is relationship. And yet it just seems a bit strange that then there tends to be a schism between that and the notion of relationships, you know, education. So it just seems really kind of an interesting observation, if you will, that relationships tend to be at the core of teaching. But then if you talk about relationships education, kind of doesn't seem to have the same weight, I suppose. It's just an interesting thought.
Thank you for that observation, and it does bring to mind the quote that, you know, a child, it's not how many things they know, it's how many things about which they care. And to care, you have a relationship. You have a relationship with the landscape, with these historical characters, so I mean, fill in the blanks, but that's at the core of a relationship, this notion of caring. So thank you for that, Adrian.
Thanks. Anne?
Hi, thanks, Deani. I suppose I want to first of all declare my utter shame that I've worked at the University of Cumbria for such a long time and Charlotte Mason College and never really looked at Charlotte Mason. So I suppose I want to thank you and everybody involved with kind of forcing me to look at this and finding out that I had far more in common with Charlotte Mason than I ever realised. But what I'm interested in, Deani, is what drew you in. So, you know, I'm blaming you for drawing me in, but, you know, like there you are over in Toronto, you know, I'm just down the road. How did you come to get so involved with Charlotte Mason?
I was a high school. I taught in government schools. I was a high school math teacher. I taught for a year in a private school in Toronto as well. And then I had children. I loved math. I loved analyzing equations, and I loved to share that with students. What I had never done in all of my teacher training, in my Bachelor of Education at the University of Toronto, etc., I had never really asked, why do we educate? I had never gone to the philosophy. And what caused that, I had a daughter born in 1990. She had a beautiful, what I think, preschool years. Those were beautiful years. She ended up in 95 going to kindergarten, and by the week, she dried up. And by Christmas, I had to pull her, crying and weeping, out from behind her bed, which is where she would hide when it was time to go to kindergarten. And my husband looked at me and he said, we can't go on like this. Go and get out your Education Act. Remember, in those days, everything was printed. So I pulled it out, or he pulled it out, and he said, look, it right here. She doesn't have to go to school till she's 6. Compulsory education at that time was 6 to 16. We could keep her home. So I said, okay, but that means homeschooling, and those people are weird because I love school. but it was getting over the hump of actually asking, moving from the mechanistic, the behavioristic, this is how we do school, we go through this textbook from beginning to end, we acquire a set. It's actually like, why are we doing this? And in 1995, when I became a homeschooler, someone said, oh, you're a homeschooler. Well, no, I'm not, but well, you are. So you better read this book. And she handed me a book which had been written about a decade earlier by someone in Cambridge, UK. And the book is called For the Children's Sake. It was by Susan Schaefer Macaulay. And I read it, and Susan Schaefer Macaulay had a similar experience a decade or so earlier. And she ended up finally finding a cottage school for her child that worked. And she said, well, what's going on in this cottage school? And the head mistress said, well, I follow the ideas of this woman called Charlotte Mason. So Susan Schaefer Macaulay went back and excavated Mason's writings. So she's doing that in the 80s when Mason's name had dropped from everyone's tongue. I'm reading about that in the 90s through that little pink book called For the Children's Sake. Many people in North America were apparently, I learned, were also reading that book. And from there, it was just this journey. And I did the same thing. I thought, if this is working so well with my own child, I still don't like homeschooling. I love schooling, and I wanted, well, what does that mean? And here we are now in the year, let's say 2025, and we're seeing so many schools opening up across North America, but also across the world that are following Mason's ideas and recovering some of these essential insights about children. I think what I love, to answer more briefly, Anne, what I love is that she has an anthropology about the child and about the adults in the child's life. She has a respect for knowledge and for reality that is separate from the child, and yet she understands child-centered learning in this way that just seems exactly like what the definition should be of child-centered learning, without expecting the child to create reality. That reality is separate from the child, but still the child is at the center of being the agent of learning. And Mason says all education is self-education. So I think Mason's got a real balance with her anthropology, with her theology, and also with what the her sense of ontology, what reality is and how we come to know it.
Sorry, I just have to say, Deani, we should have got to know each other a lot sooner. I had a daughter born in 1990 who went to school, and she did exactly the same as your daughter. I had another daughter born 2 years later on exactly the same day, and I kept her out of school until the last possible minute. Sorry, that's just very interesting. Thank you.
It's not an anti-school sentiment that we're expressing here. It's a paucity of philosophy that can be applied in many settings. And that's what Mason invites us into.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for all the questions so far. That's wonderful. And thank you, Deani, for your answers. We've got one from Helen Jones. Would you like to come on screen?
Hi, Sally. I'm going to keep my screen off if that's okay. My internet is juttering. It might just be better if I do that, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, thanks, Deani, for all of that. Perspective for education, social justice perspective, and I believe that this relational education is so incredibly important. And some of my work is, how much do teachers value these types of approaches? I just wondered, you mentioned about obviously the Charlotte Mason Institute, sort of what children do know, and also how they know. My question really is, how much work do you think needs to be done to balance this idea of relationship education against the very prescriptive nature that our education system really has? I know so many teachers who want to take this approach but can't, and feel stuck in the system, and then just get on this sort of cycle of being stuck in the system. hope that's clear. So my question really is, how much does the Charlotte Mason Institute really work to break down some of those that stuckness, I guess, that teachers find themselves in throughout their career? Is that okay?
Thank you so much. And I think it's possible. And I think the more educators that are aware of Charlotte Mason's ideas will see the wisdom in them, and they will actually see that her ideas would be incorporated in many, many settings in a way that you could go back Monday and just change some of the practices. What I will say with the Charlotte Mason Institute is that I believe we're in a phase right now of stepping back and actually creating schools. And the Institute doesn't create schools, but if there's a community that wants to start a school, they'll help support it and help it with teacher training and curriculum. We need examples of what it can look like when it's fully applied in a setting. And I think that's the era that we're in this moment, schools being set up across the world. Does that mean that her ideas can't be included in any educational setting? Absolutely not. And the more I think we can become translators, each one of us in this room today, the more we can share about Mason's ideas and encourage others to just look in them and seek for some of the wisdom and the insights that Mason has, more and more people can be bringing them back into whatever setting they are already in. And the irony is that the high stakes testing scenarios some of us find ourselves in, some of that actually gets alleviated. Mason had tests. She had intensive exams. Students wrote massive, lengthy essays, but they wrote on what they knew. And the way that the testing was part of the learning. So the examination, as the student narrates, as they're giving back, as they're retelling what they know, it's actually becoming theirs. And it was a rigorous testing system, but it was a joy because it was giving back what they knew. And I think if we can re-understand some of the ways that we do our examinations and our tests, we don't have to not have them. We just need to do them in a way that really honors the child and what they've studied and learned to care about.
Rather than the standardization of them that become, I guess.
There's so much to talk about here, and I think it would be really excellent to have curriculum experts and people who are very aware of good examinations and good testing to take a closer look at how Mason did her testing and actually see if there is a way for the current system to be married. I do not want to have to propose that it all has to be overthrown. We have to start from scratch, because I don't think there's a lot of wisdom in that either. I think that kind of disruption is not what we're after.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just while we're waiting for the next group of people to ask a question, I'll just throw in something else. I've been looking with some other people at Charlotte Mason, her life, as well as what she did with young people, and I'm particularly interested in her religious beliefs. Because obviously at that time, the period of history when she was writing, it was very much accepted practice to incorporate your own religious beliefs into your teaching. And she was unashamedly a Christian woman who felt that, and on one of your slides you talked about this, who felt that children's belief in God was very, very important. And yet nowadays, even in England, there is still the call for schools to have acts of collective worship, but there's less of an emphasis on the Christian side. And so my question really is about what is useful from Charlotte Mason's ideas, and what do you think is, I don't want to use the word outdated, but what's not as relevant to our educational context?
I think the easy answer is the fact that Charlotte Mason recognizes that children have a spiritual dimension is an incredible gives incredible promise to education in the 21st century. We became so mechanistic and behavioristic and focusing only on what could be seen and measured and touched, as though that were the only reality. Mason says there's more, and she allows us as educators to enter into that more, those other dimensions, the immaterial, the immanence of some other reality. And we all know as educators that children sometimes have more insight into that than we as adults, who are so driven by all the things, right? The clock and so the children have a wisdom. We're allowed, and the 21st century, we were invited to explore that. Mason just leads us further into that. She explores it as a Christian. Henrietta Franklin, her key administrator and actually the leader of the movement until the 1960s, was a woman of Jewish heritage who would bring her Jewish faith into her work. And so now it's a matter of other faiths coming along and looking at this. So I think Mason opens the door really wide, just like she opened the door really wide for us in 1885 to say parents matter. Yes, we prefer professionals in education. That's why she set up a professional training institute. But parents matter so much to the formation and the education of their children, and what they do in the home is education. As educators, let's wrap our arms around parents and be the support and have deep respect for that, and don't expect them to do all the things. But so I think in the 21st century, it's now to say, yeah, we all have a spiritual dimension. Reality has an immaterial dimension. It's okay. Let's explore that. Certainly Church of England, you've got 5,000 Church of England schools. They want to explore the fullness of life. That is at the core of the curriculum in Church of England schools. Well, what is fullness of life? And I think Mason helps us get to some of that.
Thank you, Deani. That's really helpful. Before I invite Adrian to ask his question, I just wonder whether some of the other authors of the monographs have any questions or any observations, or if you'd like to talk a little bit about your monograph. So, you know, Jen and maybe Chris, but you know, you might want to contribute something about your talk that you're going to be giving in a year's time, or anybody else who've got another question. So, Adrian.
All right.
Yeah, so I wanted to do that and kind of respond to what Deani says. I think in reading for mine, I think the thing that really grabbed me when I was reading about Charlotte Mason and just made so much sense with the role of the parents and the way Mason really kind of said parents are a key player in the child's education was that for Charlotte Mason, please correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of education was not about the furtherment of knowledge, it was about development of character. And so therefore that brings in all of the elements there. And so you just get a real kind of cohesive sense, I think, of what Charlotte Mason was really trying to do, which brings in the spiritual element, which you can explore that as a Christian and, you know, through other faiths as well. It also is a key role for the parent there in developing character. So I personally think it speaks massively into our incredibly broken society that we have today. I think that's huge.
Absolutely. It gives such direction. And as Mason does say, she says exactly that. What is the purpose of education? Formation of character. And how do we go about that? Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Deani. Jen, and then Chris or Karen, if you want to contribute a bit later. Jen?
Hi there. Yeah, just another observation really, and just to think about what you've been talking about, how the world's very, very different today, about the pressures of performativity and standardized tests. It's just got me thinking more so about this post-pandemic world as well, not just about the world being different, but what's happened to schools, what's happened to families, what's happened to children and parents, and how learning did change when children were being working from home when we were in lockdown, and just whether or not you've kind of seen that shift, or can we seize that opportunity that people have had to start thinking differently. I don't know whether it's a question or an observation, really, just that it does seem very timely to start to revisit things that maybe have been a little bit lost and reframe them.
I think that's a very wise insight. We are in a new time, and it came upon us very quickly. In the province that I'm in, Ontario, we have about 10 million people in the province. 150 new independent schools opened their doors, and many micro schools and learning pods, which I'm not sure if they're schools or homeschool, or maybe they are that other thing, opened up as a result. There's a hunger right now, maybe getting back to some of the questions that people like Anne and me were asking in 1995. Maybe this is a moment like that again, 30 years on.
Be interesting if she was still alive today, or if she is watching down, just to see what she would be thinking about in terms of her vision, and whether or not that was in line with what was happening now, wouldn't it? Thank you.
Thank you. Chris or Karen?
Yeah, can I dive in? I just want to say thank you very much, and also apologise. I got an important phone call about 15 minutes in, so I had to duck out for a little bit. But I'm just really thrilled to be asked to be involved in the celebrations next year. For those of you who don't know me, the area that I will be looking at is how Charlotte Mason's work links to things like development of, like Adrian just said, development of character, but also things like relationships with your environment, your sense of identity, and community. And I like what you just said, Jen, there about things that have been lost and things that need reframing. And my input will be on my engagement with the Morecambe Bay curriculum, which is promoting children's, helping them connect to their environment and recognise that the place that they live is unique, special, and somewhere of great value. So that's where I'm coming at this from. But don't expect me to give you full details of what I'm going to talk about in a year's time. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. But thank you.
That's fine, Chris. Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Karen, do you want to say a little bit about your involvement, because you've done an enormous amount of work?
Not really, Sally, compared to others. But I had some initial plans to do a monograph, as you know, linked to my interest and in oracy across the curriculum and looking at the development of oracy techniques. And I could immediately see some real parallels with some of the key work of Charlotte Mason. And I think the title of the conference, you know, An Enduring Legacy, would be very much about focusing on that. It's been a delight to be part of the planning and see it come to fruition, and I think we're in for an absolutely wonderful celebratory year, not least the conference. Something that did catch my eye was in your slides, Deani, something by, I think it was Dr. Shannon Whiteside. I took a note of that name, and it looked like she was either giving a talk or focusing on whole brain learning. Now that links very, very nicely with some of the work that I explored in my thesis around oracy, and I would really welcome the opportunity to either link up with Dr. Shannon Whiteside, if that was possible, to develop some more of my work, because I've chatted to Sally about there's huge potential to really tap into some of these areas as part of the conference work going forward. And I'm very keen to explore the living books idea and moving forward with that. So that would be certainly something I'd love to follow up as a result of hearing you today, which I always find inspiring, and I think you're an absolute delight to listen to. So thank you for sharing your slides this afternoon. But certainly if I could have that link, that would be wonderful.
Karen, I do hope that you and others, if not every single person on this call, will put in a proposal to either give a 15-minute presentation on the relevant panel. And if you go to the call for proposals on the university website, you'll see where your presentation might most naturally fit. But also, each one of you is very well positioned to offer to do a pub style chat. And that's one of the, where do we go from here? Each of you knows your own area, and you could stimulate a study, a book, a paper, other ways forward. So I just really, really encourage each of you to take a look at the call for proposals.
That's great, Deani.
Thanks, Karen.
Can I just thank Deani, first of all, for this very stimulating, very informative and incredibly well presented and planned lightning talk. So thank you very much indeed. It's been really a delight, as always, to listen to you, Deani. I would also like to remind people of several things that are in the chat. Bex, our able administrator, has put in links to the all the information about the Charlotte Mason Conference and also the series of talks. The series of talks are still a work in progress, so can people just bear in mind that, as Deani said at the very beginning, some of the titles are not quite right, but that's because we were doing it in a bit of a hurry to have that published today as a taster. But Bex and Lois and I are still working on that. The final thing is to say that our next lightning talk will be on Wednesday, the 9th of May, again at 1 o'clock, and it will be Alexandra Brown, who I have met on a number of occasions and worked with, and she's going to be talking about decolonial points of entry, and she is a secondary school teacher, a very, very able scholar, a rising star, and she will, I am sure, give us a really, really stimulating, interesting talk. So I do hope you will attend that in November. And finally, thanks once again, Deani. It's been an absolute delight. And thank you also for your phenomenal amount of work in leading us plan the conference, helping us with the series of talks, but also for this monograph series. You have stimulated our interest. Loads of us are writing monographs. You are editing them all with Hilary Cooper. I was supposed to be helping, but ran out of time. And you just do everything so magnificently, Deani, and always with a smile on your face. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do. And it's a delight to work with you at the University of Cumbria. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Every one of you gives me the encouragement to carry on in this work, and just to see that her ideas really do have value, and to hear it in your voices and see it in your eyes. And each one of you has so much potential for future impact. And I just encourage you in that work and in your collaborations. Thank you so much, Sally.